Nora Ajayi had never been the kind of wife who searched her husband's pockets or sniffed his shirts, but lately, her instincts had been whispering to her, with a kind of calm persistence she could not ignore. Julius had returned home 3 nights in a row smelling of a soft, expensive vanilla scent, one she did not own, had never bought, and certainly did not wear. It lingered on his collar, on the sleeves folded up halfway, and sometimes even on the passenger side seatbelt when she entered his car in the morning. But Nora did not accuse him, did not start a fight, and did not raise her voice. She simply watched. Her silence was sharp, but she used it gently. She studied the way he talked faster than usual, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he lingered in the bathroom too long after coming home. Her instincts were gathering pieces, and she let them. That same week, Julius's late-night calls increased. He started stepping outside to take client updates, closing the balcony door behind him as though the soundproofing was magical. But Nora noticed his shoulders trembling lightly from nervous laughter, and she noticed the way he held his lower lip between his teeth when typing messages. One night, she peeped through the curtains and watched him talk on the phone by the gate. His back turned to the house, his voice lowered, his body language relaxed in a way that husbands rarely look when speaking to their wives. She did not listen to the details. She didn't need to. A woman does not need the full sentence to understand the tone. Still, Nora did not confront him. She preferred clarity over chaos. She wanted truth, not shouting. So she let her observations sit quietly inside her mind, gathering weight. She cooked his meals the same way, made his tea the same way, smiled the same way, but deep inside, she began to prepare herself for whatever truth was waiting at the door. She sensed that something was coming, something bold and foolish, something that would expose everything without her lifting a finger. And she knew, with a quiet certainty, that when the moment arrived, she would be ready. The first undeniable confirmation came on a calm Sunday afternoon when Julius forgot his phone on the sofa while rushing to take a business call outside. Nora did not touch the phone, she never did, but the device lit up on its own, revealing a photo preview. It was the back view of a curvy woman wearing a bright yellow wig, posing in front of a mirror. Nora did not gasp. She did not blink twice. Her face remained steady as she absorbed the image, taking note of the glittery nails, the skimpy black dress, and the caption on the photo preview. "Can't wait to see you tonight." The house went quiet. It felt like the air held its breath. Julius returned minutes later, picked up his phone, and realized too late that Nora had seen something. She didn't say a word when he swallowed hard, nor when he scratched his head unnecessarily, nor when he began to rearrange the living room in anxious motions. He walked around the house like a man who heard a ticking bomb, but didn't know where it was hidden. Nora watched him with a serene expression, her silence sharper than interrogation. He tried too hard to act normal, smiling at things she had not said and laughing at jokes she did not crack. The guilt was playing on him like hot water on bare skin. Later that evening, he peeked at Nora several times, waiting for an argument that never came. That absence of confrontation troubled him more than any accusations would have. Nora's quietness was not passive, it was observant. She kept replaying the yellow wig in her mind, the boldness, the confidence, the lack of shame. She didn't know the woman, but she sensed something dangerous. This was not just an affair. This was a woman reckless enough to believe she owned the man. Nora leaned back on the bed, folded her arms, and waited. A bold woman always reveals herself. It was only a matter of time. While Nora watched everything in silence, the mistress, Tonia Gold, was feeling unstoppable. She sat in a cafe in Lekki, sipping iced coffee while bragging loudly to her friends about her victory. She bragged about Julius taking her shopping, paying for her nails, sponsoring her hair, and even buying her a new iPhone. She told them she was tired of hiding and wanted to put that wife in her place. To Tonia, Nora was just another quiet married woman who would cry in secret and do nothing. Her friends laughed and hyped her up, and her ego expanded like a hot balloon. She felt untouchable. Tonia called Julius often, speaking with a familiarity that ignored the existence of his marriage. She mocked him affectionately, insulted Nora as boring and slow, and talked about how she would soon take over. Julius, blinded by excitement and stupidity, encouraged her in his own foolish way. In his mind, he believed Tonia loved him. In Tonia's mind, Julius was nothing but a walking wallet. She didn't love him. She loved the lifestyle he paid for, the attention, and the thrill of conquering a married man. She saw him as a game she was winning effortlessly. One afternoon, Tonia made a decision that would change everything. She told her friends, "I want to teach that woman a lesson." When they asked her how, she smirked with full confidence and said, "I will invite her to the party I'm hosting. Let her come and see who truly owns Julius." Her friends screamed in excitement, as if she had planned a movie premiere. Tonia had no idea that she had just lit a matchstick and dropped it into her own future. The next Wednesday afternoon, Nora received the most unexpected delivery. A gold glittery envelope sealed with a dramatic flourish and smelling of heavy perfume. Inside was a formal party invitation signed by Tonia Gold, inviting her as a special guest to a lavish celebration at a high-end venue in Lekki. Nora stared at the card for a long moment, her face unreadable. The sheer audacity was almost unbelievable. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a very small, very controlled smile. Julius returned home and saw the envelope on the table. The blood drained from his face instantly. He snatched the card, read the details, and nearly collapsed. He began pacing up and down the house, talking fast, begging Nora not to go, insisting it must be a mistake. But Nora simply folded her arms and asked, "Why shouldn't I go? I was invited." Her voice was calm, firm, steady, so steady it frightened him more than shouting ever could. When he finally sat down with his head in his hands, Nora quietly collected the card and walked upstairs. For days, she had been observing signs. Now, the source of the perfume, the messages, and the yellow wig had boldly stepped forward. Nora wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't confused. She wasn't hurt. She was ready. Whatever this mistress believed she could prove, Nora planned to attend the party and finish the matter with grace, dignity, and precision. Some battles didn't require fists, only truth and timing. From the moment Nora confirmed she would attend the party, Julius lost his composure completely. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and couldn't think straight. He kept calling Tonia, warning her to cancel the party or uninvite Nora, but Tonia, still intoxicated by arrogance, laughed at him and told him to relax. Julius began pacing the bedroom at night, muttering to himself, checking his phone every minute, as though waiting for disaster to announce itself by text. Every time Nora entered the room, he jolted nervously, expecting her to suddenly explode into confrontation. But Nora never raised her voice. She moved around the house peacefully, cooking, arranging things, and preparing for her day like a woman untouched by chaos. Her silence infuriated Julius more than shouting would have. Sometimes she would simply look at him, and that look made him sweat. He could not understand why she wasn't fighting him, why she wasn't crying, why she wasn't even asking questions. Her calmness became a mirror, forcing him to see his own foolishness clearly for the first time. As the day of the party approached, Nora chose her outfit, an elegant, modest gown that made her look like a woman who needed no validation from the world. When she stepped out of the room, ready to leave, Julius rushed forward, blocking the door, begging her not to attend. But she only brushed past him with the gentlest shake of her head. "Julius," she said quietly, "what you fear is already waiting for you. Let me go." And with that, she walked out of the house, leaving Julius standing there trembling, knowing that the night ahead would change everything. On the evening of the party, Nora stood before her mirror, not as a woman trying to impress anyone, but as a woman preparing to step into a battlefield she never asked for. She selected a simple emerald gown that hugged her figure modestly, elegant without being loud. Her hair was styled into a neat afro bun, her makeup subtle enough to maintain her calm, dignified aura. Every movement she made was deliberate, slow, steady, graceful, like a queen dressing for a coronation where she intended to remain silent but powerful. She looked at her reflection and realized she did not feel fear or anger. What she felt was clarity, like a long-standing fog had finally lifted, exposing everything that needed to be confronted. Her hands were steady, her breathing soft, and her heart strong. Downstairs, Julius was losing his mind. He kept pacing like a man whose house had caught fire and who didn't know which direction to run. He approached Nora multiple times, each attempt filled with desperation. "Nora, don't go. Nora, this isn't necessary. Nora, let's talk." She brushed him aside with calm responses that never escalated. Her serenity troubled him more than rage would have. He watched her put on her earrings with the same tranquility she wore every morning, and every peaceful movement felt like judgment. He tried to block the doorway, but she gently shifted him aside, not with violence, but with finality. Julius's chest tightened with a fear he couldn't name. He knew something irreversible was coming. Nora stepped outside, inhaled the cool evening breeze, and walked past Julius's car toward her own without turning back. That single gesture shook him. The fact that she didn't even ask him to drive her, didn't ask if he was coming, didn't ask anything at all. It was the kind of silence that meant defeat had already begun for someone. As she began her drive to the venue, Nora's mind was clear, her heart steady, and her purpose sharp. She did not intend to fight anyone. She intended to reveal the truth. The war would not be loud, but it would be decisive. And deep within her, she knew the person who was about to suffer the most was not Tonia, but Julius. The venue was a lavish hall lined with gold-accented decor, glass chandeliers, and guests dressed like it was a celebrity birthday party. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, gossip, flashing camera lights, and loud music vibrating through the walls. But the moment Nora walked in, something subtle yet powerful shifted in the room. Conversation softened, heads turned, and whispers rippled through the crowd. Nora carried herself with a quiet confidence that made people instinctively make way for her, even without understanding who she was. She looked around, absorbing everything with an expression too calm for the storm that had brought her here. Across the hall, Julius had arrived earlier with Tonia, who was dressed in a shimmering red gown that sparkled obnoxiously under the lights. She had been basking in attention, laughing loudly, posing for photos as though the night was dedicated to celebrating her existence. But when she saw Nora step inside, her laughter froze mid-air. Her smile twitched. Her confidence faltered for a second before pride forced her chin up again. Julius, however, reacted differently. The color drained from his face, and his hands began shaking as if epilepsy had chosen that moment to whisper threats. He looked around helplessly, as though expecting someone to rescue him from his own foolishness. Guests nudged one another, whispering, "Isn't that Julius's wife? Why is she here? Did Tonia invite her?" The tension grew thick, the kind that bends conversations into curves and forces eyes to remain fixed on a scene. Nora walked to a table and sat down with the elegance of someone who owned the very air she breathed. She didn't ask for Julius. She didn't acknowledge Tonia. She simply existed with quiet authority. And that presence alone began to unravel the false glamour Tonia had built around herself. Within minutes, people were whispering louder, shifting their loyalties, waiting for the drama they sensed was coming. The party Tonia had organized was no longer under her control. Tonia took a deep breath, adjusted her gown, and marched toward Nora with a smile so forced it trembled at the edges. She wanted to appear bold, unbothered, victorious, but her eyes betrayed flickers of insecurity. Nora looked up at her with a calm, polite expression, neither intimidated nor impressed. The tension between them created silence that drew nearby guests closer, eager to witness whatever confrontation might unfold. Tonia leaned forward slightly, her voice dripping with fake sweetness as she said, "Mrs. Ajayi, welcome. I didn't think you'd actually show up." Nora's lips curved into a soft smile that was more unsettling than any insult. "Why wouldn't I? I was invited." The guests around them exchanged looks, shock, curiosity, disbelief. It was clear that Tonia had expected Nora to hide at home in shame, to avoid confrontation, to remain invisible. Instead, Nora had walked into the battlefield with a grace that overshadowed every sparkle on Tonia's dress. Tonia tried to regain control, laughing loudly to draw attention, placing her hand possessively on Julius's shoulder when he finally approached them. Julius looked like he was being led to his own burial. Tonia attempted to introduce Julius as her special guest, but the embarrassment in his eyes made her voice sound hollow. Nora simply watched them, her calm making Tonia's boldness look cheap. As more guests murmured, "This girl is foolish. Why invite the wife? She's brave or she's mad," Tonia's composure began to crack. Her plan had been to intimidate Nora, to show dominance, to prove she had won. But Nora's presence turned the situation upside down. The wife she expected to silence had shown up with dignity powerful enough to shake the entire hall. Tonia's confidence started slipping like sand through her fingers, and for the first time that night, she felt a shadow of fear crawl into her chest. Nora had not spoken more than a sentence, yet she had already destabilized the entire room. Determined not to lose her grip on the evening, Tonia grabbed the microphone and summoned the attention of the entire hall. The music faded, lights shifted, and guests turned expectantly toward the small stage. With exaggerated confidence, Tonia proudly pulled Julius to stand beside her, wrapping her arm around his waist like a trophy on display. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice vibrating through the speakers, "please meet the man of the evening, Julius Ajayi." She smirked as she watched reactions ripple across the crowd. Some gasped, others chuckled, and some looked away in discomfort. Julius stood stiffly, unable to lift his head, deeply ashamed yet trapped in the spectacle he helped create. Nora remained seated, watching the scene with a deeply composed expression. She did not flinch, did not sigh, did not show an ounce of distress. Her calmness was the sharpest blade in the room. Julius's shame grew heavier with every second. He could feel Nora's steady eyes on him even from across the hall, and it made his heart crumble. Tonia began to ramble about true love, overcoming obstacles, and finally being where she belongs, throwing indirect jabs at Nora. Each word revealed her desperation more than her confidence. The crowd began to exchange looks of discomfort, some shaking their heads at Tonia's brazenness. While Tonia basked in her moment of borrowed glory, Nora slowly stood up. She walked toward the center of the hall, unhurried, commanding attention with each step. The atmosphere changed instantly, the way a quiet storm approaches, not loudly, but with undeniable presence. Julius's breath caught in his throat. Tonia's smile wavered, and the guests held their breath as Nora, with quiet authority that silenced every corner of the hall, approached the stage. Nothing about her movement was aggressive, yet her arrival felt like Judgment Day for someone. Before Tonia could continue her speech, Nora raised her hand slightly, signaling for the microphone, and the hall held its breath. When Nora received the microphone, her hands did not tremble. Her voice did not shake. She simply turned to the audience, her posture tall and composed, and introduced herself with a single sentence that dropped into the hall like a stone into still water. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Nora Ajayi," she said, "and I am the legal wife of Julius Ajayi." The entire hall erupted into gasps, hands-on head reactions, and sudden murmurs. The weight of her words shattered Tonia's performance, drained Julius's last ounce of courage, and electrified the audience with shock. Nora did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her truth was loud enough. Tonia lunged toward Nora, her voice cracking with anger. "You don't own him. Julius said he's leaving you," she yelled. But even her words sounded weak against the composed dignity standing before her. Nora tilted her head slightly and gave a calm, devastating reply. "Leaving? That must be today's comedy." A few guests stifled their reactions, but there was no humor in Nora's tone, only truth, heavy and controlled. Julius tried to intervene, but his mouth only opened and closed like a man struggling to breathe under the weight of his own shame. Nora ignored him. She had no words for him tonight. The truth would speak for itself. Then Nora signaled to the DJ and handed him a small envelope. The DJ opened it, hesitated, then looked at Nora for confirmation. She nodded once. Seconds later, the speakers played the first recording. Tonia's own voice boasting about using Julius, draining him financially, and insulting Nora. The guests erupted again, this time with shouts, disbelief, and loud exclamations. Tonia's face went pale. Julius staggered backward, as though someone had punched him in the stomach. And Nora stood there, unflinching, letting the truth destroy everything built on lies. Her revenge did not come from shouting or fighting. It came from exposing pride with precision. And tonight, her silence had finally spoken. The hall trembled the moment Tonia's voice blasted from the speakers, echoing with the raw arrogance she once displayed proudly in private. "I'm just using Julius. He's too stupid to know he's my wallet. That wife is nothing." Her own words filled the room like smoke filling a seal chamber, suffocating her pride and staining her reputation in real time. People froze mid-conversation. The DJ stood rigid, terrified of what might happen next. Nora didn't look at Julius, didn't even look at Tonia. She simply stared ahead with a calmness that felt like a silent verdict. Guests exchanged looks of disbelief, pressing hands to their mouths, shaking their heads in shock. Tonia's previous glamour dissolved instantly, leaving her exposed, trembling, and humiliated. She glanced around desperately, as though hoping to find one person who would believe her innocence, but everywhere she turned, she met nothing but betrayal from the same crowd she earlier sought validation from. Julius felt the ground beneath his feet shift, his stomach tightening into painful knots as he listened to Tonia's words tear through his dignity. Each statement stabbed him deeper, reminding him of his foolishness, his blindness, his desperation to feel desired by a woman who never cared about him. Shame wrapped around him like chains, heavy and suffocating. He tried to step forward, wanting to stop the playback, wanting to grab the microphone and explain something, anything, but his legs refused to move. He knew there were no explanations. Everything was out in the open. The truth, once exposed, never returns to hiding. Sweat trickled down his neck as he saw familiar faces, colleagues, neighbors, clients, staring at him as though he were a cautionary tale carved in human form. Meanwhile, Tonia's face twisted between fear and rage. She stumbled toward the DJ booth, her glittering dress swaying violently as she attempted to stop the audio. But the moment she reached out, Nora raised her hand slightly, a gesture so subtle yet authoritative that even Tonia froze in place. "Don't touch it," Nora said in a voice soft enough to chill the room. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it carried finality, and the room obeyed it. The recording continued, exposing Tonia layer by layer, reducing her to the very thing she thought she had the power to weaponize. Her pride collapsed, and all she could do was stand in the middle of the hall, her mouth open, her eyes trembling, watching the empire of arrogance she built fall apart in seconds. When the recording ended, Nora stepped closer to the projector with steps steady enough to silence even the whispers. She handed the DJ the second envelope, the one containing the screenshots. The lights dimmed, and suddenly, the giant display lit up with messages so incriminating the hall erupted like a storm. Tonia's chat screenshots filled the screen. Conversations with two other men, flirtatious photos she had sent on the same nights she was with Julius, and voice notes where she openly laughed about her plan to drain Julius financially before December. One message read boldly, "This man thinks I love him. I'll finish his account before the end of the year." A couple in the front row gasped so loudly it echoed across the hall. Tonia screamed, "Stop it. This is edited. This is fake." But even her shouting sounded weak, drowned by the avalanche of evidence. Her voice cracked as she tried to defend herself, but the more she yelled, the more desperate she sounded. Her friends who had earlier hyped her stood still, avoiding her gaze, ashamed of their association with her. No one wanted to be tied to the downfall happening in front of them. Julius could barely breathe as he saw the screenshots, each message a dagger slicing through the illusion he had wrapped himself in. He felt smaller with every picture displayed, realizing just how badly he had been deceived. His own stupidity reflected back at him in high resolution, projected larger than life. Nora remained motionless, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression unreadable. She had not insulted anyone, had not raised her voice, had not threatened violence. She merely revealed what already existed. Her silence held more power than Tonia's loud protests ever could. As the final screenshot flickered on the screen, Tonia telling another man she planned to use Julius for one last shopping spree, the entire hall fell into a deep, vibrating silence. It was the kind of silence that carries truth on its back, forcing everyone in the room to confront reality without escape. Humiliated beyond comprehension, Tonia made a final attempt to seize control. She charged toward the projector table, her high heels clacking aggressively against the polished floor. The hall watched her meltdown unfold, eyes wide, hands frozen mid-gesture. She lunged toward the cables, intending to rip them out, end the humiliation, and salvage what little pride she believed she had left. But in her frantic movement, her shaking legs, trembling hands, blinded emotions, her heel twisted sharply. In one swift moment, she slipped. Her feet slid forward, her body tilted backward, and she crashed onto the floor with a force that echoed across the hall. Gasps filled the air. Cameras flashed. Someone screamed, "Jesus!" The glittering dress she had lavishly bragged about tore along the back seam, splitting open in a way that exposed everything she never intended to expose. The hall reacted with a collective shock. Some covered their eyes, others turned away, while some whispered prayers out of sympathy, even though she had brought the humiliation upon herself. Tonia lay frozen on the floor, trembling from the impact and the overwhelming shame. Her wig shifted halfway, revealing cornrows underneath, and the makeup that had once made her feel superior streaked down her cheeks in messy trails. Her pride shattered. Her arrogance burned out. She was no longer the dazzling star of the night. She was simply a woman who had been exposed at the exact temperature of her wrongdoing. Julius stared helplessly at the scene. Watching the mistress, he risked his marriage, for lying on the floor in disgrace made him feel even more foolish than before. Guilt swallowed him whole. He took a step forward, wanting to help her up, but the moment he moved, half-The Hall turned to glare at him with contempt. It became clear that helping her would only deepen his humiliation. Nora stood still, watching Tonia struggle to sit up, her expression calm but firm. She did not gloat. She did not smirk. Her silence remained untouched. The truth had done all the work. Tonia finally rose to her feet, clutching her torn dress, broken pride, and shattered dignity. She rushed out of the hall, hiding her face with trembling hands, running from the mess she created herself. As Tonia fled, every eye in the hall turned toward Julius. The room that once buzzed with excitement now felt like a tribunal chamber, and Julius stood at the center like a defendant awaiting judgment. Conversations resumed, this time harsher, louder. So he cheated on that good woman? How could a married man disgrace himself like this? After everything the wife has done for him? The voices sliced through him like sharp blades. Julius felt each comment digging into his skin, carving guilt deeper into his chest. He tried to disappear into the crowd, but there was nowhere to run. Every corner of the hall seemed to condemn him. He approached Nora slowly, but she refused to look at him. That single act hurt more than any words could. Julius's breath grew shallow as he realized how severely he had underestimated her, her silence, her wisdom, her bravery. He wanted to apologize, but the words lodged in his throat. What apology could erase this kind of public disgrace? He touched her arm gently, but she pulled away with a calm precision that felt like a final call of judgment. His heart cracked. She wasn't angry. She had moved beyond anger. She had reached a place where disappointment becomes heavier than rage. Guests began surrounding him, some asking pointed questions, others shaking their heads in disgust. A few walked up to Nora, expressing their respect and admiration for her dignity. Julius watched his wife receive the honor he knew she deserved, and the contrast deepened his shame. More photos were taken, more whispers spread. His reputation crumbled faster than he could understand. He wished the ground would open and swallow him. But even that escape was too merciful for the mess he created. Nora did not wait for the music to resume or the whispers to fade. She stepped away from the center of the hall and walked toward the exit with grace that commanded attention. Every movement she made was steady, deliberate, calm, Like a queen leaving a palace she had already conquered. Guests parted quietly to create a path for her, some lowering their heads out of respect. She did not look around, did not search for Julius, did not acknowledge the stares. She simply walked, her posture straight, her face serene. The hall watched her leave the way people watch a sunrise, quiet, reverent, humbled. Julius scrambled behind her, calling her name, trying to keep up with her steps. "Nora, please. Please wait. Let's talk. Please." His voice cracked with desperation, but she didn't respond. She didn't even slow down. When he finally reached the parking lot, she had already entered her car and shut the door. He knocked once softly, hoping she would lower the window, give him a chance, even if just to yell at him. But Nora stared straight ahead, her hands on the wheel, her expression set like stone. She started the engine without turning toward him. The sound of the engine made something inside him break. As she drove away, Julius remained rooted to the spot, watching the taillights fade into the distance, like the last visible piece of his dignity. The night air felt cold against his skin as he stood alone under the dim, glowing lights of the venue. The same man who had walked into the party with pride and foolish confidence now stood as a shadow of himself, empty, humiliated, and lost. Nora didn't look back once. She didn't need to. The chapter had closed. Her silence had spoken. The night had ended the only way it could, cleanly, completely, and without mercy. That night, Julius returned home to a silence, so thick it felt like punishment from the universe itself. The house that once welcomed him with Nora's soft presence now echoed with a coldness he had never felt before. He paced the living room with trembling hands, replaying every moment from the party. The recordings, the screenshots, the looks of pity from strangers, the judgment from colleagues, the way Tonia fell, the way Nora walked away with dignity too heavy for him to endure. He sat on the couch, stood up, sat again, unable to rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Nora's calm face, her unreadable expression, the way she refused to glance at him. Guilt dug claws into his chest, and shame pressed on his shoulders until he felt physically crushed. He whispered apologies to the empty air, hoping somehow she could feel them. But the house remained silent, cold, and unwelcoming. He sent message after message to Nora. "Please come home. Let's talk. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I'm ashamed." His words grew longer with each attempt, and when she didn't respond, he recorded voice notes drenched in tears and desperation. But Nora didn't reply. She didn't open them. She didn't acknowledge him. It was like he had been erased from her world. And for the first time, Julius realized what true fear meant. The fear of losing someone whose silence spoke louder than anger, louder than insults, louder than any confrontation he had ever imagined. He tried calling her repeatedly until his battery died, but every call redirected to voicemail, reminding him that her peace had no place for him at the moment. At midnight, Julius finally walked to their bedroom, a place that once felt like a sanctuary. But when he opened the door, the emptiness inside stabbed him in a way that no physical injury could. The bed felt larger, colder, heavier. Nora's pillow was untouched, still neatly arranged, while his side looked disordered, a reflection of his inner chaos. He lay down, but sleep refused to touch him. He turned from left to right, sat up, laid down again, clutching the sheets like a drowning man trying to hold onto driftwood. His mind was loud, his mistakes louder, and the silence of the house the loudest of all. By dawn he was still awake, hollow-eyed and broken, while the reality he feared most loomed ahead. Nora was not done. Her silence was only the beginning of consequences he could never escape. Morning light filtered into the living room, but it brought no comfort. Julius checked his phone only to find dozens of missed calls, not from Nora, but from his workplace. His heart pounded as he opened the messages. One from his boss read, "Do not come to the office today. Management needs to discuss your conduct." Another message added, "The recordings from last night have reached several clients. This has become a reputational matter." Julius sank into the nearest chair, trembling violently. He felt the consequences expand beyond his marriage into his career, his professional relationships, his financial future. The humiliation he faced at the party was nothing compared to what awaited him now. The man who once strutted confidently into boardrooms was now reduced to a cautionary tale circulating on office group chats. He tried to call his boss, but the call was rejected. He sent a lengthy message explaining that it was a misunderstanding, that he had been deceived, that he was trying to fix things at home, but he received no reply. His head throbbed. His vision blurred. Suddenly the walls of the living room felt like they were closing in. He stood up and paced again, unable to breathe properly, realizing the magnitude of what he had thrown away. His colleagues, who once respected him, were now sending around the recording. His clients, who had trusted him, were now questioning his integrity. His reputation, built over 10 years, had shattered in one night. And the person responsible wasn't Tonia. It was himself. As he sat down heavily, burying his face in his palms, he heard his phone buzz once more. A message from Nora. His heart leaped with desperate hope until he read it. "I will be home later. We'll talk then." Her tone was controlled, formal, distant, the tone of a woman who had detached emotionally. It scared him more than shouting would have. He reread the message over and over, his hands shaking. Nora's return did not feel like forgiveness. It felt like judgment, the kind of judgment no man escapes without losing something. He knew she was coming to make decisions, not arguments. And for the first time in his adult life, Julius felt like a child waiting for consequences that could break him entirely. That afternoon, Nora returned home with a calmness that chilled Julius to the bone. She entered the house without haste, without emotion, without even glancing at him. Julius jumped up immediately, rushing toward her with tears already gathering in his eyes. "Nora, please, let's fix this," he stammered. But she walked past him, setting her handbag on the dining table with deliberate gentleness. Then she turned to him with an expression so neutral it felt surgical. "Sit," she said. Julius obeyed instantly. For the next few seconds, she simply looked at him, and the silence hung so heavily between them that he felt as though she was reading every regret from his soul. He tried to speak, but she raised a single hand, a quiet command that silenced him instantly. She placed a folder on the table. Julius swallowed hard, his heart pounding painfully. Nora slid it toward him with a stillness that seemed rehearsed. "These are the property documents," she said calmly. "The house is in my name." Julius blinked rapidly, fear tightening around his throat. Nora opened another document. "The car you drive is also registered under my name. And the business account you manage? That too." Julius felt tears spill down his cheeks as reality crushed what little dignity he had left. He shook his head, whispering, "Nora, please, I'm begging you." She continued speaking, unfazed. "I'm not leaving this marriage," she said. "You are leaving this house. You will stay somewhere else until I decide what happens next." Her voice carried no rage, no tremor, only finality. And then came the final blow, delivered with calm precision. "And Julius, your boss called me." Julius's breath stopped. "They sent me the recordings last night. They said the company has been embarrassed enough." His head dropped as if weighted by cement. He covered his face and sobbed, a man fully broken. Nora watched him with an emotion he couldn't decipher, not hatred, not love, but the detached disappointment of someone who once gave everything and received betrayal in return. She stood, picked up her handbag, and said, "You will pack your things now. I won't repeat myself." Julius begged, pleaded, knelt, but Nora walked away into the bedroom, leaving him with the hardest truth. She was not punishing him out of anger. She was reclaiming her peace. Hours later, Julius emerged from the house with a small box, the same house he had walked into for years with pride and entitlement. Now he dragged his belongings like a man walking through the center of a village square after committing an unforgivable offense. The compound was unusually quiet, but that quiet carried eyes, whispers, judgment. Neighbors peeked from their balconies. A woman across the street whispered something to her sister. The gateman, who usually greeted him cheerfully, looked away, his expression stiff with disappointment. Julius kept his eyes on the ground, each step heavy with humiliation. This was not the ending he imagined for himself, but it was the ending his choices had written. As he reached the gate, he paused, hoping Nora would step outside, call his name, or show at least a flicker of pity. But she didn't. She remained inside the house, distant and unreachable, like peace that no longer belonged to him. He knew she was done. Done with the lies. Done with the disrespect. Done with carrying a man who didn't know her worth. Julius wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, but his tears only fell harder. He had never felt so exposed, so ashamed, so reduced. The man he once believed himself to be, confident, respected, admired, had vanished completely, replaced by someone even he could barely recognize. He walked out of the gate with his head bowed low, dragging the box behind him. Each step felt like a confession, every breath like a consequence. He didn't know where he was going, a hotel, a friend's house, anywhere that could hide him from the world's eyes. But one thing was certain. He had lost more than a home. He had lost Nora's trust, her respect, her peace. And unlike material things, those were not easily regained. The walk of shame was long, painful, and unforgettable, and he knew he would carry this weight for the rest of his life. After Julius left, the house suddenly felt lighter, as though something poisonous had finally been removed. Nora walked through the room slowly, touching the furniture, feeling the silence, reclaiming her space. There was no sadness in her steps, no anger, only clarity. She cooked herself a small dinner, opened the windows to let fresh air in, and allowed herself to feel the peace she had not tasted in months. Later, she dressed in a soft, comfortable gown and sat on the balcony, letting the evening breeze wash over her. For the first time in a long while, her heart felt steady, unburdened, safe. She did not celebrate his downfall. She celebrated her freedom from carrying the weight of a man's carelessness. The next morning, Nora took herself out to a quiet restaurant overlooking the water. She ordered her favorite dish, something she had not done in ages because she had been too busy managing Julius's chaos. She watched families eat together, friends laugh, couples share quiet moments, and she smiled, realizing that she wasn't lonely. She had herself, her strength, her dignity, her peace. For years, she had given so much patience, devotion, trust, and for a while she thought losing Julius would break her. But now she knew better. Losing a liability was not loss. It was liberation. As she drove home, sunlight filtered through her windshield, bathing the car in a warm glow. Everything looked different, brighter, softer, calmer. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know whether she would eventually forgive Julius or start a completely new chapter. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never again dim her peace for someone who did not know her worth. Her revenge had not been loud or violent. It had been dignified, precise, and complete. And now her life, finally, belonged fully to her. Please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.